Happily married couples of Reddit, what was the moment you realized this is the woman man you were going to marry? We had decided we were going to take a crack at homemade pizza. We found a recipe online. We made a grocery list. We were standing over the case in the deli that had the pepperoni. The recipe didn't list how much pepperoni to get. I said, "How many packages?" He said, 2. One for us to put on the pizza and one for us to eat while we make it. It's stupid and silly, but that's when I knew both, because I realized that he knew that I, and him, but mostly me, I love pepperoni, and he apparently knew it, would graze the pepperoni as we cooked. And the mental image of the two of us together in the kitchen eating pepperoni and making pizza filled me with such warmth. We'd fallen out of touch. Living in different cities. Hadn't spoken in over 6 months. Not for any reason other than we just had other things happening. I was bored at a friend's party and my phone buzzed. She'd sent me a text. If I were a bison. That would be neat. I decided at that point I was going to make things work and move much closer to this bison. We've been married 6 years. He had been working all day and was on his way home for some much deserved sleep. But then I drunkenly texted him asking him to pick me up McDonald's. He not only turned around and bought my food, but he texted and asked if the friends I was with wanted anything while he was there. And surprisingly they all did want something. Because you cannot ask a drunk basic itch if she wants fries and not expect her to say anything other than of course she wants fries. He then drove it to the bar we were at and made sure they all had Ubers or DDs before taking me home. I told him I loved him on the way home and never looked back. I was in love with my best friend for a long time and could tell he had feelings for me too. We had been on one outing that could have been considered a date and we spent long hours with just each other, talking in his car. But I was afraid to admit that the nature of our relationship was a romantic one by explicitly confessing feelings. Finally, I realized that some things are worth taking a risk for, and I asked him out with the oh so smooth phrase, "Hey, UHH. Would you UHH? Maybe like to go to a museum sometime? Like, as a date?" We held hands in the museum. Went on a hike to a tower. While we were cuddled up, we both had a moment where we saw our reflection in his skylight and thought, yeah, this is the person I'm going to marry. I'm typing this with him cuddled up next to me. I realized when the eclipse happened. My mom was sick at home. And I was at work. I asked him if he could go and sit with my mom instead of with me, and he did. He sent me pictures of them and they were both happy. They hadn't known each other long, but it was as if they didn't need to get to know each other. My family just clicks with him. I knew if a man cares that much about me and my family, he's special. I've posted this before, but we were about 3 months into dating and I hadn't really told her what my parents did for work. Her parents own a successful business. I immigrated here and my dad was a cashier at a convenience store. When she asked me, I hesitated to answer. And she immediately picked up on it and said, "You should never be ashamed of your parents. They've worked so hard to get you where you are. I'm so proud of them." And honestly, I cried. I realized right then that I was going to marry this girl. No regrets at all. She makes me a better person every day. Edit. Thanks for the gold, stranger. I'll be sure to share it with the Wi-Fi. I got married yesterday. No joke. And I'm still so jazzed I cannot sleep. Scrolling here beside my new wife, hoping to join her in dreamland soon. We've been together almost a decade already. But even so, a wedding is just a lovely outpouring of support from your real friends and family. And many more things too. It's also new right now that I am still processing it, but I know this much, I'm very happy. To answer your question, I knew almost immediately, 9 years ago, that to make it to yesterday I had to face myself in the mirror and weigh my life choices. We'd been dating 6 months. I'd been drinking too much for years. And she had planned for a while to move abroad and teach for a while. I had a full-time job with benefits. But it was desk work, and I remember the moment you're asking about. Well, I made the decision to quit. To cash in my retirement and follow her. And the time finally came for her to leave, and she did. Flying out to Europe. It was in that moment when I found only sadness and longing. Where doubt could have been that I knew I'd be in it for the long haul. I knew I'd found a partner. Someone who'd weather life changes with me and love me through my iterations, and who in return I'd naturally support and love as well. 9 years and many adventures later. We are wearing rings together. I couldn't be happier. She just knew when I needed a hug without asking. He spent time to really get to know me. He listened to me. We wanted the same things. My parents liked him and his liked me. Then I got pregnant, lol. 25 years and counting. I was in bed with a bad flu and listening to his radio show when I heard him casually mention his life partner for the first time. Confused. Sick me was like, wait. What? Was that a reference to me? Actually. Yeah. Come to think of it. That does sound about right. I guess I am. Over 18 years later I can still remember that moment, me alone in bed with a stuffy nose. And my heart leaping. But hey, sometimes romance isn't all that romantic by movie standards. We had been dating for 3 months and I went to pick her up for a date. When I walked in, she and her mother were sitting at the kitchen table. We left. I asked her what she and her mother were doing. Planning our wedding. I said okay. October we'll be married for 37 years. When hours after we first met, we ignored the rest of the people eating their dinner in the lounge room and 8 hours at the computer while looking up ghost stories online. We were 13. Got together at 15. And it'll be 16 years together come October. I only ever wanted to be with her. When I had Bell's palsy on half my face, while she taped my eye closed so I could sleep, it hit me. I'm going to marry this girl one day. Then one day before I was going to pop the question, we were in church and I prayed for a definite sign that I was making the right decision. Something that I would recognize immediately. When we came out of the church, it had begun to freaking snow in Texas, which is completely unheard of. Okay God. No need to go 10 plagues of Egypt for me to get the message. Chill bro. I love reading. I love literature. I love grammar. I love words. Yes. I'm weird like that. On our first date he used the words mushroomed, as in the housing development had just mushroomed around the area, and remiss, as in would it be remiss of me to ask you to lunch? That was me. Hook, line and sinker. One date and I told my mum I had met the man I was going to marry. Okay. He was also hot. Had great manners. Beautiful eyes and the world's finest ass, but it was that damn mastery of the English language that got me over the line. It will be 25 years in January. I met my now husband 12 years ago at a party. We both had partners at the time, but when he walked in the door I was instantly drawn to him, but I knew nothing could happen. However, I always remembered that feeling he gave me. Fast forward 5 years ago and I ran into him again, and again that feeling popped up, but this time we were both single. We started to hang out and on our 4th date he ordered me Indian food. Sourced my favorite Japanese beer and let me swear at the TV whilst watching the Rugby Union World Cup, and I knew then and there, if a man could endure that kind of display and unladylike behavior and still wanted to see me again, then he was the one for me. Been married 2 years. Have 2 sons and I still wake up happy to see his snoring face every morning. Love doesn't adequately describe how fond I am of him. Marriage and love are 2 different things. I was obsessed with my husband when we were 16. He was burly, smart, quiet until he came out with something witty and sarcastic. His shoulders were impressively broad and he smelled amazing. Then. And forever since. There's him and then the rest of the world. My intense teenage crush just got more intense. And I still happily stare at him. 25 years later. But marriage isn't the same things as love. We needed to grow up. We needed to get on the same page with having kids. How to budget. Where we wanted to live. How to share chores, all the stuff that you build a life together with. For the little stuff and the big stuff. And that took a long time. I'm not sure when it transitioned into when, and then we started making concrete plans. Love is easy. Marriage is work. I puked all over my girlfriend while I was asleep after a party. She was still there the next day. We're married for 3 years now and expecting our second child in a month. The first time she fell asleep in the car driving back from a weekend adventure. It just made me feel good knowing she was with me. I shit you not. We were 14 or 15 years old, and after a couple discussions with the dude about nothing in particular, I told my best friend I was going to marry him one day totally sincerely. She nodded her approval and agreed. And then we proceeded with the rest of the day. As if this was a totally normal thing to just announce out of the blue. She started jokingly calling me MRS. Dude's last name too. He and I started dating shortly after that. And got married in our mid-20s. He never knew about it. We're 32 now, and I mentioned this to my husband. He was totally freaked out. And alluded to that episode of South Park where the girls have their own club secret society due to their gender, and frequently asks if whatever they agree upon sparkles with everyone else. I crashed a motorbike scooter thing I had rented in Vietnam with her on the back. It messed up her foot for about a week. And was sore for longer. She took it in stride. Didn't get angry or let it ruin the trip at all. I know so many people who would have let that ruin it. Instead, we did some of the truly spectacular ruins in Cambodia with a combination of crutches and piggyback rides. It really made me realize how special she is, and always brings a smile to my face when I think of it. Our first date went so wrong to what he had planned. I could tell he was trying so hard. And everything went bad. He put his arm around me during the movie 5 minutes before it ended. The place he tried to take me to for dinner closed the kitchen before we got there. We went to Burger King instead, and I had to pay because they wouldn't take his $100 bill. He was the first guy to buy me flowers. And he had brought them at the start of that date. But I didn't have a vase. So after Burger King, we went to Walmart to buy a vase, and as we are standing on the vase aisle he says, "Pick any case you want. I don't care the cost." I grabbed one that was only about $20. And when we got to pay, he had left the 100 in the car. So I paid for the vase too. It was just comical by that point. We have been married over 10 years now and have 3 beautiful children. I realized my wife was the woman I was going to spend the rest of my life with when my grandmother passed away. She was there for not only me, but also my father. She also came with us to the state my grandmother lived in for the funeral and to help us go through all her things. I never asked her to do any of this either. She just did it. She puts up with all my shit and still loves me. A sainthood is waiting for her in a few 100,000 years. Well, might as well post my own story. Me and my wife have known each other for a very long time, and we have been friends through some rough times for me and my family. She was a huge troublemaker, and I hadn't really gotten close to her until I was adopted by her family due to my father ripping our own apart. She was kind of a bully to everyone aside from me and my sister, and that's what made us get close. After some really bad fights she got into, she spent a year in a military boarding school. When she came home she changed but was still the goofball who I considered my best friend, and from her becoming a more calm and nice person I just knew this was the girl I wanted to spend my life with. We got married when I turned 20 and we're going on to 4 years strong now. Not a specific moment but a question realization that came to mind. Would my life be happier with this woman or without her? Upvoting because I'm curious. Hoping to find that someday. Ha. I read that as happily murdered couples of Reddit. We'd been best friends 4 years and were trying out a long distance relationship. It was still in the phase where we wouldn't get affectionate around my daughter who had just turned 1. Well, he drove the 3.5 hours to spend a week with me and got there late at night. By 9 o'clock the next morning my daughter was admitted into the hospital with a serious case of RSV that eventually turned into pneumonia. I expected him to cut the trip short and head home. But he stayed with me as long as he could. He made sure I ate and showered and slept. I know I was a huge itch to everyone around me. I was so stressed out and scared. One night he brought McDonald's up to the hospital and downloaded a candle app on his phone so that we could go on a date during his visit. I'd been in love with him for years, but somewhere in that week I knew I couldn't live without him. I ended up moving closer to him shortly after that, and he proposed 3 months after I moved. My daughter is now 4. Perfectly healthy. And he has been the best father anyone could ever ask for. They love each other so unconditionally. We're welcoming our second baby tomorrow morning. When the honeymoon stage ended and I didn't run like I usually did. When my Sue and I started dating. It was not supposed to be a long-term thing. I was preparing to study overseas and I didn't expect to continue our relationship after my departure. I was not into long-distance relationships. Long story short. Even though she knew that, she stood by my side until the very last day. That last day I was finishing packing my clothes and had to leave for a moment to get something. When I came back, she was finishing packing my stuff, saying that I had to make sure that everything was okay. That's when I knew I didn't need to look for someone else. 3 years later, after countless challenges, we are living together. We were just laying in bed cuddling. And he said, "I love you." And then he said, "And because I love you, I love your daughter too." And that was it. I was really sick. Going on day number 4 of high fevers and a bunch of other fun. She was taking care of me the entire time. Running to the store to get whatever was needed and taking care of our dogs so I could rest. I woke up just craving a sandwich and asked if she could make me one. Without hesitation she made us both sandwiches and brought and came upstairs to the bedroom. Put on a movie and laid next to me while we ate a sandwich. Then she fell asleep on me. We had already been together a few years. But this was the moment I knew I'd be a damn fool if I didn't marry her. A few months later I took her to the ocean for the first time. We were living in Wisconsin where she lived all her life. And proposed. That was 3 years ago and we finally got married this past May at Mount Rainier in Washington. She's actually sick now, laying next to me in bed. It's 3:26 AM and I'm going to run to the store shortly to get more soup and medicine. We've had a lot of great memories. But these moments matter most. My sister's funeral. He was just so amazing during the whole awful process. I knew one day one of us would bury the other. An awful but amazing realization. It was when my husband clicked with my family. He wasn't afraid to spend time with them, and would actually suggest it. He greeted my grandfather with "Hello there, young man," and then help him out of the car or walk from a restaurant. He never got frustrated with the slow pace or the crazy that is my family. Plus my family loved him. They would call to talk with him or pull pranks on him. My parents even invited him to a cousin's graduation in Wisconsin and paid for his airfare. It was his first flight and my dad and mom pranked him so hard about his duties on a flight. He took all of that with grace and smiles. He loved my family back. It made me aware that this crazy we had going on could work long term. We met online. After a few email exchanges I was fairly certain he could spell and actually use grammar. On our first date his car wouldn't start but he was totally unfazed. I've seen guys have complete meltdowns over considerably less. By our third date we were finishing each other's sentences and having complete conversations in Princess Bride quotes. People were asking how long we'd been married by the time we'd been dating 3 months. Been together 22 years. Married for 20. Been to hell and back. We each lost a parent to cancer and I had a stillbirth the 3rd year we were married. We survived that. We're bulletproof. We started dating my senior year of college after a brief friendship at the beginning of the school year. He was my first boyfriend and I'd never even had a close friendship with a boy before. But we had such similar interests and the more time we spent together in those first few weeks the more in sync we clearly were. We'd say the same things at the same time all the time. Or one would make a random comment and it would literally be word for word what the other was thinking. Part of the getting to know each other phase was sharing movies we loved that the other hadn't seen. He once mentioned wanting to show me Wallace and Gromit's A Close Shave. Sheep were our mutual favorite animal for some reason. but we didn't get around to actually watching it and it sort of slipped out of mind. Then one night a few weeks in, he was planning to come by to hang out. Before he arrived, as if tempting fate, I said to myself, if he brings the Wallace and Gromit DVD with him tonight, I'm going to marry him. He did bring it, and I married him. We had talked marriage, but I had bad credit and didn't want it to mess up his finances, so he couldn't buy a house. One day he called me from work and he had a mortgage broker on the phone with us who explained that our separate finances would stay that way. And in fact my husband's good credit would help mine get better. At the end of the call my husband says, "So now will you marry me?" We'll be married 20 years come October and our credit scores are both over 800 now. When he flipped the pancake perfectly, we were in my little kitchen and he was super confident that he could make the flip. I was standing there like a panicky little bird going no, it'll drop, but he just went hop. And the pancake flipped over in the frying pan. Right then and there, I knew he was going to be a super fun dad to our future children. I met my husband at work when I was a single mum to a young baby. We were friends first for a few months before we really started dating because, you know, you have to be sure when you have a baby. I was having a really difficult time. Suffering a little with PND, impacted by the fact my ex-partner was on a pretty severe stalking campaign against me. If it had been the other way around, I'm not sure I could have dealt with the drama so early on in a relationship. But he managed. Because he's literally the best man alive. He let me decide the pace we went at. When he met my son, etc. A few months into dating, things got really bad with the stalking and I was struggling to sleep at night etc. One evening he arrived to my flat and let me know that he had just bought a house a few miles away with us in mind. Before we met he'd been saving for his own place in a famous building in our town. But he'd realized that a city center flat didn't suit the life he wanted to live. Now he had the two of us. He was driving to work one day and saw the development selling houses. And he just knew that was the one and put in the offer. I thought before that he could be the one. But I knew then and there that this was forever. It was just a logical step in his mind to make us a new home that we felt safe in. He just factored us right into his life plans like it was nothing. He proposed a few days later. We put my flat up for rent. And all moved in together into the new house. That was 5 years ago. We got married in 2017. And he's just adopted our son. Count my blessings every single day.